Hello, hello, and welcome back to another. Oh, let me full screen this. I don't see all my other tabs. Wouldn't want to leak any of my information. But welcome back to another episode of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where last we learned about the educational background of young Victor and his interest in natural philosophy and the works of Paracelsus and the other guy whose name I forget. Paracelsus. Paracelsus. I don't remember the other guy. Either way, Cornelius Agrippa. I don't even remember who that is. It's like one of those names that you recognize, but Cornelius Agrippa, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Heinrich, what does Heinrich have to tell us? Let's see. German Renaissance polymath, physician, legal scholar, soldier, knight, theologian, and occult writer. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, this Wikipedia article, I'm sure I can glean something of interest from it later, but. But for now, let us just get on with Victor's decline into his unhappy path, which led him to where he is today, on a boat, retelling his tale to an explorer after having failed to catch his creation. Yeah, let us get on with it. Also, I'm sampling this thing where I have my monitor as some different settings, which may or may not mean that I can read slightly longer without my eyesight deteriorating to a state where I struggle to read properly. I don't actually know if it's going to help, but it doesn't hurt to try. But yeah, let's get into it. Chapter 4. From this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardor those works so full of genius and discrimination, which modern inquirers have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university. I found even in M. Kremp a great deal of sound sense and real information. Combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In M. Waldman I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. In 1,000 ways he smoothed for me the path of knowledge, and made the most abstruse inquiries clear and facile to my apprehension. My application was at first fluctuating and uncertain. Gained strength as I proceeded, and soon became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of morning, whilst I was yet engaged in my laboratory. As I applied so closely, it may be easily conceived that my progress was rapid. My ardor was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. This guy really likes, or this Mrs. Shelley likes using ardor. I swear that appears very frequently. Professor Kremp often asked me, with a sly smile, how Cornelius Agrippa went on, whilst M. Waldman expressed the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged, heart and soul, in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hoped to make. None but those who have experienced them can conceive of the enticements of science. In other studies you go as far as others have gone before you, and there's nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit there's continual food for discovery and wonder. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one's study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study. And I, who continually sought the attainment of one object of pursuit, was solely wrapped up in this, improved so rapidly that at the end of 2 years I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point, I had become as well acquainted with the theory and practice of natural philosophy as depended on the lessons of any of the professors at Ingolstadt. My residence there being no longer conducive to my improvements, I thought of returning to my friends and my native town, when an incident happened that protracted my stay. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly, always tripping me up, peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence, I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has ever been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted, cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries. I revolved these circumstances in my mind, and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to the study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy. This was not sufficient. We must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not even remember to have trembled at a tale of superstition or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy. The churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which, from being the seat of beauty and strength, had become food for the worms. Now I was led to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. My attention was fixed upon every object most insupportable to the delicacy of human feelings. I saw how the fine form of man was degraded and wasted, beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain. I paused, examining and analyzing all the minutiae of causation, as exemplified in the change from life to death and death to life, until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in upon me. Light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated. I was surprised that among so many men of genius who directed their inquiries towards the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly shine in the heavens than that which I now affirm is true. Some miracle might have produced it, yet the stages of the discovery were distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labor and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, or I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated. I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavors as soon as I should point them towards the object of my search, and to exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead and found a passage to life, aided only by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story. You will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I was then, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, and he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possessed the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, or with all its intricacies of fibers, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organization, but my imagination was too much exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking, but I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, at last my work be imperfect, yet when I considered the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future successes. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticality. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say about 8 feet in height and proportionably large. After having formed this determination and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane. The first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. New species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. These thoughts supported my spirits, while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardor. My cheek had grown pale with study, my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes, on the very brink of certainty, I failed, yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realize. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I dedicated myself. The moon gazed on my midnight labors, while, with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness, I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble, my eyes swim with the remembrance. But then a resistless and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul or sensation but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance that only made me feel with renewed acuteness so soon as, the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from charnel houses and disturbed, with profane fingers, the tremendous secrets of the human frame. In a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase, I kept my workshop of filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets and attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials. Often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst, still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near to a conclusion. Summer months passed while I was thus engaged, heart and soul, in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage, but my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me also to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I well remembered the words of my father. I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection. We shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regarded any interruption in your correspondence as a proof that your other duties are equally neglected. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feelings. I could not tear my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object, which swallowed up every habit of my nature, should be completed. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to bias or faultiness on my part, but I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in imperfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind and never to allow passion or transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affection and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful, that is to say, not befitting the human mind. If this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affection, Greece had not been enslaved, Caesar would have spared his country, America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. But I forget that I am moralizing in the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sight which before always yielded me supreme delight, so deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew near to a close. Now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety. I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines, or any other unwholesome trade than an artist occupied by his favorite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to a most painful degree. The fall of a leaf startled me. I shunned my fellow creatures as if I had been guilty of a crime. Sometimes I grew alarmed at the wreck I perceived that I had become. The energy of my purpose alone sustained me. My labors would soon end. I believed that exercise and amusement would then drive away incipient disease. I promised myself both of these when my creation should be complete. Pardon me. Getting on for 1 a.m. so I'm sure you can excuse me if I am but a little tired. But even so, I think we can fit another chapter or two in, especially with these chapters being quite as short as they are. So let us proceed. Chapter 5. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 a.m. The rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form. His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black, flowing, teeth of pearly whiteness. These luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same color as the dun-white sockets in which they had been set, his shriveled complexion and straight black lips. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length, lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured. I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavoring to seek a few moments of forgetfulness. But it was in vain. I slept, indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth, in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I printed the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Features appeared to change. I thought that I held the corpse of my dear mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form. I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. Cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth chattered. Every limb became convulsed. When, by the dim and yellow light of the moon that forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, waking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse which I had so miserably given life. No mortal could support the horror of that countenance. Mummy, again endued with animation, could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly then, but when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. I passed the night wretchedly. Sometimes my pulse beat so quick and hardly that I felt the palpitation of every artery. At others, I nearly sank to the ground, though through languor. Why am I to be wrong? nearly sank to the ground through languor and extreme weakness. Mingled with this horror, I felt the bitterness of disappointment. Dreams that had been my food and pleasant rest for so long a space were now become a hell to me. The change was so rapid, overthrow so complete. Morning, dismal and wet, at length dawned and discovered to my sleepless and aching eyes the church of Ingolstadt, its white steeple and clock, which indicated the 6th hour. Porter opened the gates of the court, which had that night been my asylum. I issued into the streets, pacing them with the quick steps, that if I sought to avoid the wretch whom I feared every turning of the street would present to my view. I did not dare to return to the apartment which I inhabited, but felt compelled to hurry on, although drenched by the rain which poured from a black and comfortless sky. I continued walking in this manner for some time, endeavoring by bodily exercise to ease the load that weighed upon my mind. I traversed the streets without any clear conception of where I was or what I was doing. My heart palpitated in the sickness of fear. I hurried on with irregular steps, not daring to look about me. Like one who, on a lonely road, doth walks in fear and dread, having once turned around, walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. Coleridge's Ancient Mariner. Continuing this, I came at length opposite to the inn at which the various diligences and carriages usually stopped. Here I paused, I knew not why, and I remained some minutes with my eyes fixed on a coach that was coming towards me from the other end of the street. As it drew nearer, I observed that it was the Swiss diligence. It stopped just where I was standing. On the door being opened, I perceived Henry Clerval, who on seeing me instantly sprung out. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed he, "how glad I am to see you! How fortunate that you should be here at the very moment of my alighting." Nothing could equal my delight on seeing Clerval. His presence brought back to my thoughts my father, Elizabeth, and all those scenes of home so dear to my recollection. I grasped his hand and in a moment forgot my horror and misfortune. I felt suddenly, for the first time during many months, calm and serene joy. I welcomed my friend, therefore, in the most cordial manner, and we walked towards my college. Clerval continued talking for some time about our mutual friends and his own good fortune in being permitted to come to Ingolstadt. "You may easily believe," said he, "how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that all necessary knowledge was not prized in the noble art of bookkeeping. And indeed, I believe I left him incredulous to the last. His constant answer to my unwearied query. Sorry, what am I doing? Where was I? His constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as that of the Dutch schoolmaster and the vicar of Wakefield. "I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek. I eat heartily without Greek." But his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. me. And you can tell that my awakeness is fading because I keep fucking up my reading. It gives me the greatest delight to see you. But tell me how you left my father, brothers, and Elizabeth. Very well and very happy, only a little uneasy that they hear from you so seldom. By the by, I mean to lecture you a little upon their account myself. But, my dear Frankenstein, continued he, stopping short and gazing full in my face, Nope, that's a different line. Gazing full in my face. I did not before remark how very ill you appear. So thin and pale, you look as if you had been watching for several nights. You've guessed right. I've lately been so deeply engaged in one occupation that I have not allowed myself sufficient rest, as you see. But I hope, sincerely hope, that all these employments are now at an end, that I am at length free. I trembled excessively. I could not endure to think of, and far less to allude to the occurrences of the preceding night. I walked with a quick pace, and we soon arrived at my college. I then reflected, and the thought made me shiver, that the creature whom I had left in my apartment might still be there, alive and walking about. I dreaded to behold this monster, but I feared still more that Henry should see him. Entreating him, therefore, to remain a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs, I darted up towards my own room. My hand was already on the lock of the door before I recollected myself. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcibly open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a great spectre to stand waiting for them on the other side. Nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully in the apartment. No, there's a pause there. I stepped fearfully in... I fucked it up again. I stepped fearfully in. The apartment was empty. My bedroom was also freed from its hideous giant. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune could have befallen me. But when I became assured that my enemy had indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy and ran down to Clerval. We ascended into my room, and the servant presently brought breakfast. But I was unable to contain myself. It was not only joy that possessed me. I felt my flesh tingle with excess of sensitiveness. My pulse beat rapidly. I was unable to remain for a single instant in the same place. I jumped over the chairs, clapped my hands, and laughed loud. Clerval at first attributed my unusual spirits to joy on his arrival, but when he observed me more attentively, he saw wilderness in my eyes for which he could not account. My loud, unrestrained, heartless laughter frightened, astonished him. "My dear Victor," said he, "what for God's sakes is the matter? Do not laugh in that manner. How ill you are. What is the cause of all this?" "Do not ask me," cried I, putting my hands before my eyes. I thought I saw the dreaded spectre glide into the room. "He can tell. Oh, Save me, save me. Imagined that the monster would seize me. I struggled furiously and fell down in a fit. Poor Clerval, what must have been his feelings? Meeting which he anticipated with such joy, so strangely turned to bitterness. I was not the witness of his grief, for I was lifeless and did not recover my senses for a long, long time. This was the commencement of a nervous fever which confined me for several months. During all that time, Henry was my only nurse. I afterwards learned that, knowing my father's advanced age and unfitness for so long a journey, how wretched my sickness would make Elizabeth, he spared them the grief by concealing the extent of my disorder. He knew that I could not have a more kind and attentive nurse than himself, and firm in the hope that he felt my recovery, he did not doubt that, instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest actions that he could towards them. But I was in reality very ill, and surely nothing but the unbounded and unremitting attentions of my friend could have restored me to life. The form of the monster on whom I had bestowed my existence was forever before my eyes. I raved incessantly concerning him. Doubtless my words surprised Harry. He at first believed them to be the wanderings of my disturbed imagination, but the pertinacity with which I continuously recalled the same subject persuaded him that my disorder indeed owed its origin to some uncommon and terrible event. By very slow degrees, and with frequent relapses that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remember the first time I became capable of observing outward objects with any kind of pleasure. I perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. My reading and speaking have both gone completely out of the fucking window. Holy shit, I am so tired. For some reason, I don't understand. I woke up at 10 a.m. today. I shouldn't even be tired. I don't get it. Okay, let's start that again. By very slow degrees and with frequent relapses that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remember the first time I became capable of observing the outward objects with any kind of pleasure. Perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. It was a divine spring, and the season contributed greatly to my convalescence. I felt also sentiments of joy and affection revive in my bosom. My gloom disappeared, and in a short time I became as cheerful as before I was attacked by the fatal passion. "Dearest Clerval," exclaimed I, "how kind, how very good you are to me. This whole winter, instead of being spent in study, as you promised yourself, has been consumed in my sick. How shall I ever repay you? I feel the greatest remorse for the disappointment of which I've been the occasion, but you will forgive me. You will repay me entirely if you do not discompose yourself. Get well as fast as you can. And since you appear in such good spirits, I may speak to you on one subject, may I not? I trembled. One subject? What could it be? Would he allude to an object on whom I dared not even think? Simple sentence giving me a fucking struggle, man. I really need to start streaming earlier. Every time I stream late these days, I become dead. I trembled. One subject. Would it be? Would he allude to an object on whom I dared not even think? Compose yourself, said Clerval, who observed my change of color. I will not mention it if it agitates you, but your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from one of you in our own belongings. Wait. I'm just inserting words at this point. But I will not mention if it agitates you, but your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from you in your own handwriting. They hardly know how ill you have been, and are uneasy at your long silence. Is that all, my dear diary? How could you suppose that my first thought would not fly towards those dear, dear friends, my love, and who are so deserving of my love? If this is your present temper, my friend, you will perhaps be glad to see a letter that has been lying here some 5 days for you. It is from your cousin, I believe. Okay, well, I'm definitely calling it here because I am not in a state to be able to read anything with any amount of accuracy. Frankly, I don't even know what happened in that last chapter apart from Clerval coming back. Oh, thanks. Hi, nice to see you. Welcome. You're here just in time for me to stop streaming. I would go on, but I am so tired and I cannot read with any degree of quality. But yeah, it's nice having you. Thank you for joining. Maybe I'll see you on the next stream. Yeah, it's always nice to have people pop in and do a little chatting. It's not something I get too often as a little wee streamer with but a handful of follows. But it's always nice to have somebody come in to talk to. But yeah, I guess I'll see you later. Hopefully you'll be back for the next stream, which will be tomorrow, I think. But yeah, until then, we'll see you. Have yourself a nice evening or afternoon or morning, wherever you may be. I can't account for time zones or whatever. But yeah, catch you later. Bye.